That's how long a community has been holding its breath. 29 days of unanswered questions, 29 days of sleepless nights, tearful vigils, and a silence so heavy it feels like it could crush an entire town. And then, on day 29, something shifted. A reward was announced, a significant sum of money, placed on the table by people who refused to let this story disappear into the darkness. People who believe that somewhere out there, someone knows something they haven't yet found the courage to say. But here's what nobody was talking about publicly. The reward didn't just bring hope. It brought new questions, uncomfortable ones, the kind that make investigators look at old evidence with fresh eyes, the kind that make people in quiet neighborhoods whisper things to each other they'd never say out loud. Who is behind the reward? Why now, on day 29 specifically? And what does it mean for the truth about what happened to Nancy Guthrie? Because Nancy's story, her real story, is not the one most people think they know. There are layers beneath the surface, a life filled with warmth, with love, with quiet dignity. And somewhere between that life and the questions that haunt this case today, there's a truth waiting to be found. Stay with us, because everything you're about to hear matters deeply. Nancy Guthrie is not a headline. She is a person. And that distinction matters more than almost anything else in a story like this one. In a world that moves fast, where news cycles churn and social media trends disappear within hours, it becomes dangerously easy to reduce a missing or endangered person to a name in a chyron, a face on a flyer, a case number in a police report. It becomes easy to forget that behind every investigation, behind every press conference and every candlelight vigil, there's an entire universe of a human being. Nancy Guthrie is someone's family, someone's friend, someone who laughed at ordinary things, who had routines and preferences, who mattered to the people around her in ways that cannot be measured or counted. Her story has drawn attention not because it is sensational, but because it is deeply, painfully human. For 29 days, a community has rallied. People who knew Nancy and people who never met her have united under a single urgent belief: that she deserves answers, that her story deserves truth, that silence is not acceptable when a life hangs in the question mark of the unknown. And now, with a reward offer entering the public conversation, the case has taken on new energy, new urgency, new complexity. This documentary exists because Nancy Guthrie's story deserves to be told with care, with respect, and with the full weight of human emotion it carries. We are going to take you through the days leading up to this moment. We are going to talk about who Nancy is, what the community that loves her has done, and what the reward now placed on the table could mean for everything that comes next. Because on day 29, something changed, and the question is, will it be enough to finally break through the wall of silence? Every story begins somewhere quiet, long before any of this. Before the vigils and the search parties and the news cameras, Nancy Guthrie was simply living her life. She grew up the way many people do, with family around her, with the particular texture of an ordinary life that feels unremarkable until it is suddenly, violently interrupted. She had a history, a childhood, years of accumulated experience that shaped the person she became. Those who knew Nancy describe her with a consistency that is striking, warm, dependable. Someone who showed up, someone who listened when others talked, and who carried herself with a quiet kind of dignity that didn't demand attention but earned it naturally over time. She wasn't someone who sought the spotlight. She wasn't defined by drama or controversy. She was defined by her relationships, by the depth of care she brought to the people in her life, and the way she made those around her feel seen and valued. But life, even for the warmest and most loving among us, is never entirely without its difficulties. Nancy had navigated challenges the way most people do, privately, persistently, and without asking for sympathy. There were hard seasons. There were moments that tested her. There were pressures that the outside world never fully saw, because Nancy was the kind of person who faced her struggles internally and kept moving forward. And it is that quiet resilience, that fundamental human strength, that makes what happens so devastating to those who love her. Because when someone like Nancy disappears from the ordinary rhythms of daily life, the absence is felt with a force that is almost physical. Something is wrong. Everyone around her knew it, and the clock began ticking. Nancy Guthrie was not a celebrity. She was not a public figure by choice or by ambition. But in the 29 days since questions about her safety began circulating, she has become something that matters far more than fame. She has become a cause. Her name has been shared thousands of times. Her face has appeared on social media pages run by strangers who never met her, but who felt compelled to help. Community organizations, local advocates, and ordinary citizens who simply could not look away have come together around her story in a way that is quietly extraordinary. This is how communities reveal their character. Not in the easy moments, not when everything is fine, but in the moments of crisis, in the days when someone is missing and the world keeps spinning as though nothing is wrong. That is when you discover what people are truly made of, and the community connected to Nancy Guthrie has shown, day after day for 29 days, that it is made of something strong. Search efforts were organized, tips were gathered, pressure was applied, consistent, dignified, and relentless on anyone who might have information. And now, the reward. The announcement of a reward in a missing persons case is never a neutral development. It signals escalation. It signals that those closest to the situation believe that money, placed in front of the right person at the right moment, might be the thing that finally loosens a tongue, opens a door, or sends a crucial tip to investigators. It signals that people are serious, and it raises questions that no one yet has fully answered. Here is where the story becomes complicated, because a reward, while powerful and necessary, also casts shadows. When money enters a missing persons investigation, it changes the dynamic in ways that are both helpful and dangerous. On one hand, it incentivizes information. It reaches people who might otherwise stay silent, people who have something to say but haven't yet found a reason compelling enough to say it. On the other hand, it opens the door to false leads, to people motivated by financial desperation rather than genuine knowledge, to tips that send investigators down wrong paths and consume precious time. Investigators know this. They have seen it before. And so the announcement of a reward on day 29 carries with it a double edge. Hope on one side, and the very real risk of complication on the other. But what has made people in this community lean forward in their seats? What has generated genuine murmur and quiet, unsettled speculation is not just the reward itself. It is the timing. Why day 29? 29 is not a round number. It is not a symbolic anniversary. It is not the kind of marker that typically prompts a new public development. And yet here we are, on day 29 specifically, with a reward suddenly and deliberately placed into the public conversation. Those familiar with missing persons cases will tell you that timing is rarely accidental. When something happens on a specific day, it is often because something else happened first, something behind the scenes, something not yet public, something that pushed the people involved to act now rather than later. What was that something? That is the question hanging in the air like smoke that simply won't clear. The people who love Nancy Guthrie don't talk about her in past tense. That is important. In the language of those closest to her, Nancy is present tense. She is living. She is someone who will return. And the fierce, deliberate optimism behind that choice of language tells you everything you need to know about the love that surrounds her. Her family has endured 29 days of a particular kind of suffering that most people will never have to know. The suffering of not knowing, of waking up each morning without an answer, of going through the ordinary motions of daily life, meals, phone calls, small quiet tasks, while carrying an extraordinary weight of fear and uncertainty. There is no manual for this kind of pain. You cannot prepare for it. You cannot manage it efficiently or process it on a schedule. It simply sits with you, heavy and relentless, demanding your full attention while life insists on continuing around you. And through all of it, the people who love Nancy have continued to show up, to speak her name, to refuse to let her become a forgotten case in a filing cabinet somewhere. That refusal is its own form of love. It is an act of profound loyalty to keep saying someone's name when the world seems ready to move on, to keep placing her face in front of strangers, to keep believing that the next tip, the next lead, the next morning might be the one that changes everything. Nancy Guthrie has people who love her with that kind of fierce, unbreakable determination. And that matters. It matters more than any single piece of evidence or any individual investigative development. It means she will not be forgotten. 29 days changes a community. The people who have been living inside this case, the family, the friends, the advocates, the investigators, the strangers who became invested because something in Nancy's story quietly touched them. None of them are the same as they were on day one. Time does that. Uncertainty does that. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that sets in after weeks of sustained fear. It is different from ordinary tiredness. It lives in the bones and in the spirit. It is the exhaustion of hope maintained against the constant pull of despair. Day after day, without resolution. And yet, alongside that exhaustion, something else has been building. Resolve. The kind of resolve that does not come easily. The kind that is forged specifically in the fire of prolonged struggle. The kind that quietly says, we have come this far, we have held on this long, and we are not stopping now. The reward announcement on day 29 is an expression of that resolve. It is a community saying, in the most practical and deliberate language available to them, we are still here, we are still fighting, and we believe that the truth exists and that it can be found. That belief, stubborn, costly, and utterly human, is what drives a case forward when every easy path has already been exhausted. So let's come back to the question we started with. Why does the reward spark new questions? Here's what we know. The reward in the case linked to Nancy Guthrie was not announced in a vacuum. Sources familiar with the situation indicate that it came at a specific moment, a moment when investigators and advocates both recognized that traditional methods of generating leads had reached a plateau. The tips had slowed. The public's short attention span had begun, slowly and painfully, to drift toward other things. And the people closest to this case made a calculated decision to re-inject urgency into the public conversation before momentum could fully die. But here is what the reward also does that no one is quite saying openly. It signals that someone, somewhere, is believed to have information. Rewards are not offered into empty air. They are offered with a target, not necessarily a named target, but a category of person. Someone who witnessed something. Someone who knows something. Someone who has been choosing silence for 29 days and who might, finally, be persuadable. The fact that this reward exists, and exists right now, tells us that investigators and advocates believe that person is real. And that changes everything about how we understand this case. It means this is not a situation where answers are completely out of reach. It means the wall of silence that has stood for 29 days has a door in it somewhere. And the reward is the key. Here is what I want you to take away from Nancy Guthrie's story. Not the mystery, not the questions or the timelines or the investigative details. What I want you to take away is this: ordinary people contain extraordinary worth. We live in a culture that sometimes measures value by visibility, by follower counts and headlines, and the size of the stage a person stands on. And by those measures, most of us, most of the people we love, most of the people who make our lives genuinely meaningful, would never register. But worth is not measured in visibility. It is measured in the people who refuse to stop fighting for you, in the strangers who share your face because they believe your life matters, in the community that holds vigils and organizes searches and places reward money on the table 29 days later because giving up was never an option they were willing to consider. Nancy Guthrie matters. Not because her story became public. She mattered long before any of this. She mattered in the ordinary, invisible, daily ways that most human worth expresses itself in relationships, in kindness, in the quiet fabric of a life lived among people who love you. And that is the truth this story is really about. Not the mystery, not the reward, not the questions and the timeline. The truth is about what human beings do for each other when it matters most. They show up, they stay, they keep saying your name, and sometimes, if enough people simply refuse to stop, the truth finally comes home. We are holding on to hope for Nancy Guthrie. We are watching, we are waiting, and we believe that day 30 might just be the day everything changes.